we often hear it said that we should be the master of our minds rather than our mind being the master of us. And we also sometimes people would put it by saying we have to control our minds so our minds don't control us. Because if my mind controls me, that's bad. That's bad news. And we can see the kind of sense of what is meant here, that it's expressed in a confusing way all the same. It sounds superficially good to talk about mastering one's mind. It sounds great. So there's my mind, and I can say to it, well, I'm having no more trouble out of you. You're good for nothing, so and so. I've got you banged to rights now. You're not going to get a chance to ruin my day. It sounds great. So it's like being a lion tamer, and there's me, and there's my mind, perfectly trained and tamed and whatever else, and it's never going to jump on me unexpectedly again and try and chew my leg off or whatever. Because that's the type of thing that a savage mind could do. It could definitely chew you to pieces. A mind that is untamed will regularly try to tear us to pieces like a ferocious wild beast, we could say, even though that's getting a bit carried away. But the problem with all of this talk is that if I'm yapping on about mastering my mind, what exactly am I saying here? Who is going to master my mind? And then I'll say, well, me. But when I say me, that's the mind talking, because when the mind says me, when I say me, I mean the mind. Because the me is a construct. It's during the day, as I go about my business, I'm operating on the basis of my thinking mind. And because I'm always operating on the basis of the thinking mind, I don't know that I am. It's like riding a horse so much you don't even know you're riding a horse anymore. It's just so natural. So basically, when I say that I would be better off if I could master my mind, what I really mean is when I talk about mastering my mind, I talk about using my mind to master my mind. Because whenever we do any controlling, whenever we do anything, we use the mind. We use the mind it's like second nature. I use it for everything. I want to talk to somebody, I use my mind. What will I say to them? Or have some idea, some vague kind of agenda or other. We don't have to use the mind for everything, but we do because it's like a convenient help for us. It's like an autopilot or something like that. It can do stuff for us. So when I talk about mastering my mind, I really mean I'm going to control my mind by using my mind. And straight away we can see we've entered into a nasty little knot there. That is definitely not going to have any resolution. It's kind of pretty much the same knot that we enter into with any therapy that is based on using the mind to correct the mind, or using the mind to help us, help free us from the mind. In a very, very superficial way, it makes sense. It makes sense if we don't go into it at all, if we don't actually reflect on it in the least. And we're kind of prone to doing that. We hear something we think goes in our head, yeah, that sounds okay, because we haven't reflected on it in the least. Now, if we did reflect on this, we'd realize that what we're looking at is an infinite regress. So it's like the old Latin saying, who guards the guardians? So I've got all these guardians, or we've got all these guardians, but you can't trust them because they're up to no good. They're scamming and they're taking bribes and they're corrupt. So we need someone to guard the guardians, which is obviously the thing to do. So we get some super guardians, and they guard us from the guardians. But then, as the Latin phrase has it, who is going to guard the guardians? And that problem never goes away, no matter how many levels or hierarchies of guardians we have, whether we have 10 billion levels of guarding, we're still as bad off as ever, because right at the top of the hierarchy is a guardian who isn't being guarded. And there is no way out of that. Obviously, it's an infinite regress. The thing about an infinite regress is that there's no way out of it. Now, I could just say, well, I'll keep on doing it over and over and over again. I'll keep on regressing to the nth power. And maybe it'll work out for me. Maybe I'll hop out of the regression and everything will be okay again and I can get on with my everyday life. But of course, that doesn't happen. There's no way to get out of an infinite regression just by infinitely doing it, because infinitely doing it is what the infinite regression is all about. You can infinitely do it for an infinite length of time and you're never going to be better off, not even a tiny little bit better off at all. So that's explaining what an infinite regress is in psychological terms. So what that really means, there's no way to have some kind of structure or some kind of understanding or some kind of skill set or some kind of protocol that can help to manage the mind. Because we're using a guardian to guard another guardian. We're using the second tier guardian to guard against the wrongdoing of the first tier guardian. Because whatever strategy or whatever structures or whatever protocols I have to stop my mind running away with itself, those strategies, those protocols, those whatever they are, structures, are the mind. Whatever I put in place, whatever rule-based approach that I adopt, that is the mind. So if I do want to master my mind, I can't use the thinking mind. But because the thinking mind is all I know, it's my one and only tool, just about, for most of us, we're certainly not encouraged to develop any other modalities in this particular culture. So because that's all we know, because the mind, the thinking mind, is our only means of navigation, our only means of operating, talking about mastering the mind is totally useless to us. It sounds nice, but it's totally useless. It's just crap. When we say that, that's just crap. We're just speaking crap. It's no good to anybody. It's no good to mouse or man or beast or whatever the saying is. And furthermore, just going back a bit, the idea that who is going to master the mind is actually an idea that I have about myself. So I have an idea that I am me, and I have an idea that I need to master the mind. So it's all ideas. It's nothing else but ideas. It's like an onion of ideas peeling off one level after another. It's all just ideas. You'll never get to anything there that isn't an idea. It's ideas forever. Actually, were we to gain a little bit of insight into what's really going on, which we can do when we stop trying to think about everything and work it out using thinking, but just let sense or the insight or the awareness come to us by just basically not doing anything, not trying to jump to conclusions, but just letting that insight come to us, which it will. It does that all by itself. What we would see is that there is no one to master the mind. There's no one there to master the mind, because the only one who would be being the master is an idea that we have of ourselves, an ego. So who controls the ego, the superego, etc., etc.? So I know Freud didn't really go above the superego, but in practical terms, it's like tortoises. It's like the idea of a tortoise on the back of a tortoise on the back of a tortoise forever and ever and ever and ever, as I keep saying. There's no one there to master the mind. Where is he? Who is this? Who is this? When we meditate, it's not like we're creating a superego to master the mind. We're actually putting the ego on the back shelf, on the back burner, putting it to one side a bit, so it doesn't get involved in everything, so it doesn't have a finger in every pie, so being the terrible busybody that it is, it doesn't get to micromanage everything. And that's when life feels a bit better, when we have relegated the thinking mind from the primary position, from the pedestal, from the golden throne, back to where it can just go and sit somewhere else, but not on the pedestal. Surprisingly, as soon as we do that, we feel a lot better in many, many ways. Of course, the mind will tell us, you won't be, it's going to be terrible. If you get rid of me, things are going to get really bad and you're going to be sorry. The thinking mind definitely says that. It'll put us off. All sorts of bad stuff can happen if you get rid of me. I'm protecting you the whole time. You don't know what I'm protecting you from. Without me, you're nothing. That kind of thing. It's kind of abusive, really. The relationship of thought with us is essentially abusive, even though in most cases it's not abusive enough for us to spot it as being such, but in some cases, of course, it is. Sometimes we're in no doubt at all that the old thinking mind is a total abuser. And it's always potentially like that. It's always abusing us, but generally we don't see it. We don't spot it because we're too brainwashed. We kind of don't think about things. Well, better to say, we don't reflect on things enough. We don't reflect on things very much at all. Because in order to reflect on things, we'd have to put the thinking mind on the on the back burner to one side, a little bit like that. So what we see is that actually the whole thing about meditation is not to create someone to stay in control and control things so nothing goes wrong. So that's what control, obviously, control is there. Why it's so good, why it's so attractive to us, because that's how we know things won't go wrong, because we're good at controlling. And that is the source of all our woes, the source of all our neurotic misery. Too much controlling, because the controlling limits our lives more and more and more and more, limits our freedom more and more and more. And we imagine that it's for our good, that this the controlling, okay, it's not ideal, but it's saving us from a bad thing. So when we're meditating, we're putting this to the test, because we're getting rid of the levels of controlling, however many they might be. And we're just seeing what happens when all these levels of controlling aren't there. And obviously the level of controlling itself is not going to take happily to this, as I was saying. So we have to just listen to its complaints and its warnings, but gently, in a peaceful way, dispense with the controlling anyway. Stop banking on it. Stop investing so much in it and see what happens, even if it's just for the period of time of the meditation, 20 minutes, half an hour, whatever the hell it is. See what happens when we don't control. So this isn't really compatible with the idea of mastering the mind, because mastering sounds a hell of a lot like controlling, or controlling sounds a hell of a lot like mastering. So really it's the exact opposite of that. Now what we would think straight away is that the mind, if unchecked, will do all the bad things. It'll embarrass us, it'll get us in trouble, it'll act up, it'll act the maggot, it'll do all sorts of bad things. And that's the original sin doctrine right there. So we have to have the morality, the superego, we have to have a level of control to stop us doing bad stuff. So we have to control ourselves. So what we're actually doing here is we're reversing the process of enculturation, which goes back a couple thousand years ago. I mean, this is the whole point of Christianity, that you have to fight against the devil, strive to be a good person. And striving means controlling, and controlling means the mind. So then there again, we're investing in the mind, we're banking on the mind. All of that stuff, not just the New Testament, but we can think back to the commandments in the Old Testament. So suppose I have a bunch of commandments, and it doesn't matter what the hell they are. It could be on a Tuesday you go and stand on your head and sing Hey Jude backwards. If that's a commandment, whatever, you just go and do it. It doesn't matter what the commandment is. We have to read it, understand it, obey it, enact it. And that's the mind, that is thought. Rules or commandments, if you use a more biblical word, equal the thinking mind. It tells us what's good, what's bad, what's allowed, what isn't allowed, what's right, what's wrong, etc., etc. So everywhere we look, we can see we've been sewn up, we've been stitched up with all these levels of control, going back to Moses and his tablet. And I really would suspect that it wasn't the divine that provided these commandments. I mean, God's pretty smart, right? He knows that putting control systems in place or putting rules in place is going to create a state of unfreeness, a state of neurotic torment. The answer is not for us to control ourselves or be controlled by someone else or society. The answer is for us not to need to be controlled. So we can be free but also not do bad things. Is that at all possible? Can we be free from all the control hierarchies and yet not unleash the inner horrific beast of the id? Is that at all possible? And the implicit message from our culture, the implicit message from Orthodox religion is no, that's not possible. You get rid of that control, you're going to do the devil's work. You're going to be dancing to Satan's tunes all day long on the radio. You're going to be bopping along to them, tapping your feet. Jesus has got some right good tunes, hasn't he, this Satan fella? Which is astonishing when we think about it. It's absolutely, that writes us off totally. And the whole idea of morality, the whole idea of being a good person or being a godly person, living life in the way that we are told God wants us to live, is all about controlling the hell out of ourselves. So that doesn't come from the divine, is the point I started off making and then forgot about it. That comes from us. That comes from us human beings. That's our stock in trade, controlling. It's not very. It's basic. It's just it's bog standard. It's very, very basic. That's all we know. We're lame. We're lame creatures. That's all we know is controlling. The difference in, I suppose, Taoism or Buddhism or Vedanta is that we don't have this original sin thing, which means we have to control and restrict ourselves. It's certainly true that that way of looking at things can take root and does exist in the East. But the underlying paradigm is more liberating in the fact that there isn't this unspoken assumption that who we are without control is basically and just automatically doing Satan's will. I mean, that's a weird one to come up with. Once we say it out loud, we know it's weird. I don't even need to try and prove in whatever type of arguments that yes, that is not right or that's stupid. We know it. Just to say it, it's a damn weird thing to say. Original sin. Who thought of that one? So the Eastern approach, the basic paradigm in the Eastern approach would be to divest all these levels of control and see can we get to the point where we're living naturally and wholesomely. So the whole idea of living harmoniously with the Tao, the way of things, means not listening to the thinking mind and following its rules, because rules aren't the Tao. There are no rules in the Tao. The way is not written down and it can't be written down. We have to go up a level. We're not talking about these bloody rules the whole time. It can't be legislated. The Tao can't be legislated. It's like us. If we think freedom's a good thing, then we say, well, there must be freedom. Everyone must be free. We're going to legislate. The legislation is the antithesis of freedom. Rules. If I say you have to be free, that's a rule. I've taken your freedom away. We're incapable of the subtlety of grasping the paradoxicality inherent in rational thought. So because we can't perceive the paradoxicality that's inherent in rational thought, we get screwed up with it time and time again. We don't know why we're getting screwed up, because we just can't see it. Because we've invested so much in thought, we can't look at it and say, well, actually, yeah, you can't live life on the basis of thought. It's like you can't live life on the basis of rules. You can't live life by taking away all freedom, because life is synonymous with freedom. So it's like our way of living is to take away our own freedom to do bad things. I've taken away the freedom that I had to do bad things, and now I'm going to be good. Does it really work like that, though? And I think thousands of years of experience prove pretty conclusively that it damn well